So we have Perek Aleph. We are up to the story of the settlement, the beginning of David's kingdom. This is where he actually takes charge after the death of Shaul. In chapter 12, we have the death of Shaul. And now in chapter 11, we're going to go forward. And this is what Ezra Sofer, what the whole point of Divrei HaYamim has been going towards. And now we are actually seeing the establishment of the Beit David. Now, it's interesting to note that what we get in our Perek, let's share. Here, what we get in our Perek is a very short beginning, right? Which has two parts to it. One part is the first part is the establishment of David's kingdom. So the first three psukim are how he becomes king over all of Israel, and the second part is how he captures Yerushalayim, which are the two most basic things that happen in David's career. Now, what's interesting is the rest of the Perek here, from Pasuk Yud, is a very long Perek, all the way to Pasuk Mem Zayin 47. In other words, we have 37 psukim listing the great warriors that worked for David. Now, we'll do what we can with it because we can't get through everything there. But it's interesting to note, and this is what we're going to have to do every time we do Divrei HaYamim. We're going to have to compare and contrast the same stories in Shmuel Bet. So what's interesting is that in Shmuel Bet, let me just show you. Shmuel Bet, chapter 5, okay? At the beginning, this is the beginning of David's career. Shaul dies in Shmuel, and Sefer Shmuel at the end of Shmuel Aleph, and the first Perek of Shmuel Bet is David's discovering that he's died and his lament and all of this. And then you have a period of time when David HaMelech has a parallel thing going on with Ishbosheth. In other words, Avner, who is Shaul's cousin and his chief of the army, Avner, after the death of Shaul, put Shaul's son as ruler over the children of Israel. And this is going to be a very big mistake. As a matter of fact, the Chazal say that Hashem was upset with Avner for doing that. Here. For what reason was Avner punished by being killed? Is it because he should have protested to Shaul about the killing of the priest of No, but he did not protest. Rabbi Yitzchak says he did protest, but he wasn't answered. But the king, that is David, should Avner die like a naval, like an evil person? And the Chazal say, what is the reason that he died that way? And the interesting answer at the end of the whole discussion here is, he delayed the kingdom of David for 2.5 years. And because he should have seen that David was supposed to be the next king. And instead of doing that, he propped up Ishbosheth. Now, again, Divrei HaYamim is not really interested in these situations. So whereas in Shmuel Bet, we see Avner and the establishment of the kingdom of Ishbosheth over the rest of Israel, and we see that Avner is assassinated by Yoav because Avner killed his brother Asael. and then two evil people kill Ishbosheth. All of this stuff does not appear in Divrei HaYamim. Ezra Sofer is not interested in side issues. He wants to talk about David and Melech. And it's really interesting when we get to the beginning of our Perek. I'm just going to go back here for a moment. We're going to see that the children of Israel come to David and they say, "You be our king." So the Chazal have a problem with this story because they say, here's how it goes. David is king for 40 years. He is king 7 years in Hebron and 33 years in Yerushalayim. And during those 7 years that David is king in Hebron, Ishbosheth is king for 2.5 years. And we don't hear about that in Divrei HaYamim at all. Ezra Sofer is not interested in that. He only wants to, I decided we're going to have to, follow the Trump pattern. He's going to make David great again. That's Ezra's plan. He wants to make David great again. So this stuff is not part of the discussion. Now, it's important to understand that Chazal are very divided on. If you look into the story, okay, we'll do the math. Okay, if David is king 33 years in Yerushalayim and 7 years in Hebron, and Ishbosheth was king for 2 years, where were the other 5 years? What was happening outside of Hebron during those 5 years? And this is a problem. The Chazal have a problem with this because they're not sure. There's a machloket. If Ishbosheth was king in the first 2 years, or 2.5 years, when David was king in Hebron, and then there's like this vacuum which becomes filled when David becomes king over everyone. Or it's also possible that there was a vacuum after the death of Shaul, and at the end of the 7 years, like the last 2.5 years, Ishbosheth is king. And as soon as Ishbosheth dies, then David becomes king. So it's not at all clear which way this is going. So in our discussion, okay, here we are. In our discussion, we're going to just look at the parallels and try to understand where is Ezra going. There's a second half. Oh, I'm sorry. I just wanted to show this to you also. The second half of this Perek, which is really more than a half, it's much longer, all the list of the Giborim and their feats, the heroes of David. This appears not in chapter 5. The parallel chapter at the beginning is chapter 5. But for the heroes, the parallel chapter is chapter 23, which is almost the end of Shmuel Bet. Shmuel Bet ends in chapter 24. So that means we have the discussion of David's heroes all the way at the beginning of David's career, right up there with when he becomes king and when he conquers Yerushalayim, and he has all these heroes. So that's a very interesting question. Why does it appear at the beginning of David's story in Divrei HaYamim and at the end of David's story in Shmuel Bet? So the first thing we have to figure is that many things in Shmuel Bet do not appear in Divrei HaYamim, and we said that Ezra this is not his job. His job is to make David great again, and this whole section is not, the whole story of Ishbosheth and Amnon. This is not relevant to the story. The Giborim, we might say, is relevant, the heroes of David, because they helped David to establish a great kingdom. These are unbelievable heroes. You'll see their feats of heroism, and it's unbelievable what these people do. And we'll go through some of those stories. And it's important to remember that they are the big supporters of David. Many of them, 400 people, joined David back when he's running away from Shaul. And those are they come to him at Ziklag, right? And many of these people stick with David through thick and thin. So perhaps what we want to say is that those Gibborim are helping David establish his kingship. In Shmuel Bet, we see it at the end. It's kind of a retrospective, and we've gone through all the stories, the ups and the downs, and everything in between. And now we're saying, those were great heroes who helped David in his leadership. So that would be perhaps one way of looking at it. Now let's take a look at the Psukim here. Pasuk Aleph. Vayikavtzu Klei Yisrael David Chevrona Lemor Hine Atzmacha Ubasarcha Anachnu. And all of Israel came to David in Hebron, saying, "Behold, we are your bones and your flesh." Now, the word etzem means a bone. It's important to understand that it's used in Hebrew, certainly in modern Hebrew, to mean myself. Atzmi. Atzmi b'sarcha ani. So Laban says to Yaakov, we are deeply related. And it's important to understand because there's a lag here, and it's something that is extremely important to understanding the character of a David. Like, he's an unbelievable human being. How does he, he's it's interesting. He's the only person, if I'm not mistaken, in the Tanakh that we hear people saying to him and about him, "You are like an angel of God." So what does that mean? What are we supposed to understand from that? A person who's like an angel of God is a person who's not like everybody else. He's a very, very holy person. And what is it that sets David aside? And we see, again, in the Tanakh, we always have to look inside to understand personalities. We don't get like a description, he's like this, he's like that. So here we have, and I'm going to go into Shmuel Bet, chapter 2. Okay, so in this chapter, David HaMelech is actually anointed 3 times. He's anointed by Shmuel and Navi in chapter 16, Shmuel Aleph. Shmuel is told by God, I have seen a son in Beit Lechem to Yishai, and he is going to be the next king. And Shmuel reluctantly drags his feet over and anoints David. Nobody knows about it. It seems to be a big secret because they don't want Shaul to find out. But that's the first. Now here in chapter 2, we find David's reaction to the situation. Now he hears that Shaul is dead. He knows he's been anointed to be king. But what should he do? So he asks Hashem, shall I go to one of the cities of Yehuda? Now I'm no longer being hounded and pursued by Shaul. Should I go back to Yehuda? Should I join up with my tribe? And Hashem says, go up. And David says, okay, where should I go? And Hashem says, Hebron. Now, this is classic David. David doesn't make a move without consulting Kadosh Baruch Hu. He's like an angel of God. He is a messenger of God. That's his role. I don't do anything until God tells me. He should be, if he was, I always had this weird, English literature background. So like I make these weird Lahavdil Elef Alpha Havdalim. I think about Macbeth. Macbeth is told he's going to be king, and he goes off on a rampage, killing everybody who's in his way. David says, what should I do now? Should I go back to Yehuda? Go back to Yehuda. Where should I go? Go to Hebron. Now he goes to Hebron with all his people. And Vayavo Anshe Yehuda Yimshechu Sham et David lemelech habeit Yehuda. And the people of Yehuda come to him and say, we want you to be our king. And that's okay. David does not demand anything. David doesn't push himself. David doesn't say, I'm next in line. God anointed me. I should be the king. He waits till they ask him, and then he takes leadership. He is a very humble human being. He knows what he should do, but he's not pushing himself. And here, the next section, which is very interesting, is he sends messengers, the people of Yabesh Gilad, who had rescued the bones of Shaul and his sons and buried them. And he says, thank you. That was a wonderful thing you did. And I will reward you for that. He's nothing to do with Yabesh Gilad, but he has a role, a leadership role, and he makes sure to tell them that this was a wonderful thing. Now in chapter 5 in Shmuel, so this is very similar to what we see in our pasuk, right? What does this mean? Okay, we are your flesh and blood. We want you to be our king. We believe in you. We are all one nation. And here we see how the children of Israel, this is why it makes sense to say that to make sense to me, and this is just my theory, that Ishbosheth's rule was actually the first 2.5 years. It makes sense to me that there is time, there's a vacuum going on at 4.5 years when there is no leadership, and they're starting to see that, David is supposed to be the next king, and then they come to David and say, we want you to be king. And don't forget, this is the whole Israel. That includes Binyamin, that was Shaul's tribe. Everyone has come to the conclusion that David should be the next king. And there are a number of ways of darshaning this pasuk, but one of them is to think about that David is a descendant of Ruth. And there were people, specifically Doeg Hadomi, who said, well, why should he can't even be king? He can't even be Jewish. He's a Moabite. And now they're saying, we don't hold from that stuff. We know that you are one of us. We are your flesh and blood. We want you to be our king. And now they will come to him and they say, just as a proof to this, pasuk bet, gam t'mol gal shilshom. Also yesterday, also the day before, this is a biblical expression meaning previously. Gam b'yot Shaul melech, even when Shaul was alive and was our king, you took us out and brought us in. The general understanding of Motzi Mevi is the head of the army. You were the one who took us out to war. You were the head of the army. You were the leader de facto, even when Shaul was alive. But Yomer Hashem Elokecha lecha, and Shem your God said to you, Ata tireh, with an ayin, you will be the shepherd at Am Yisrael, Batatia Nagid al Am Yisrael. And this is so interesting because this is what Shmuel tells David back in Shmuel Aleph. Hashem has said, you will be a shepherd of my people. And how do they know this? It's a very interesting story. Like, where does this come from? How do they know? And it seems likely that it became, a popular sentiment all around the country that David should be the next king. Let's not forget that he was very much a favorite before Shaul started persecuting him and chasing him down. He was a very great favorite among the people. And and all the elders of Israel come to the king in Hebron, and he makes a covenant with them in Hebron. Lifnei Hashem. Lifnei Hashem could mean before the assembly of the people, before wherever they worshipped Hashem. But it's a very I'm sorry, it's not the new Hebrew. It's official. It's official if this Canaan who are like Sanhedrin, if they're going to make a treaty with David, this means it's very official. Another time he's anointed. And this is all coming back to the original prophecy of Shmuel. And notice that David doesn't ever declare himself king. He waits for people to come to him, and then he picks up the gauntlet. And it's an interesting comparison. This you will be the shepherd of my people. And the Medrash says that God tested David and Moshe the same way. And Moshe Rabbeinu was also a shepherd. And the way you treat your little lambs, and the way you prevent them from stealing people's grass, and the way you take care of what happened in there? Somebody is drawing on it's so interesting. The way you are taking care of the individual sheep, that shows that you'll be a good leader. So this is true for Moshe Rabbeinu, and now it's true of David. So, okay, and it's very clear that the house of Shaul is on the down. We have the only one left is Mephibosheth, the lame son of Yonatan. It's kind of sad, but he's not going to be the king. Now, the next section we have, okay, and that's again the greatness of David, the humility of David, something to think about. Now he becomes king, and the first thing he says is, "I have to capture Yerushalayim." The pasuk Dalet. Vayelech David v'chayisrael Yerushalayim miyivus b'shem haYivusi yoshvei haaretz. I'm sorry, b'sham haYivusi yoshvei haaretz. So there's so much history in the Yerushalayim story, so I think we need to go back a little bit. I just want to make one more comment about David being king above everybody, and the comment he makes with the elders. Okay, so the comment he makes with the elders, among the things that they agree on, is that he will not punish anyone who was a supporter of the house of Shaul. And the other part is that he will not favor his own tribe, and he will be the king over everyone. So these are two important things that are ratified by the elders of the Sanhedrin. Now, let's talk about Yerushalayim. So in the chat, I sent you a little video about how David conquers Yerushalayim, which is put together by Ir David. And Ir David is where I was today. They have many, many tours. And the tour that I went on with my sisters and my nieces was a very interesting tour, wonderful guide. And it was about the Pilgrimage Road. It just opened up in January. So if anyone is looking for a tour that people haven't done, it's a strenuous tour, very tiring. A lot of climbing up and down. It was extremely hot today. Half of it is underground, so it's very cool. But half of it is outside and very steep climbing up and down stairs and slopes. But it's fascinating. What's the history of Yerushalayim? Okay, so Yerushalayim was first called Shalem by Melchizedek, and Avram called it Hashem Yireh after the Akedah. And Hashem put these two names together and called it Yerushalayim to give honor to what Avram said and to what Melchizedek said. Now, back in Gracious, I will show you. Abraham makes a deal. Abimelech comes to him, who's the king of Gerar. Gerar is on the coast there, which we know, like in the Aza territory. So Abimelech was a Plishti king, generic name. And this wave of Plishtim, the first wave of Plishtim, the time of the Avot, we hear about the different Abimelechs and the different times of the Avot. These were not the same kind of belligerent Plishtim that come in the second wave in the time of Shaul and David. So he comes along to Abraham. Abraham is very well respected. He says, let's make a deal. Okay? For 3 generations, we don't harm each other. And Abraham says, okay. Hashem is not happy with Abraham. Why are you making this deal with him? But this is what Abraham does. So when Joshua comes to conquer the land, okay, so second, Joshua tries to conquer this land. Here. Very long Perek here. This is chapter 15 in Yoshua, and it's describing the different borders of the tribe of Yehuda. And one of the things it says is that there was a border at Gei Ben Hinnom, the valley of Hinnom, which is opposite to the Shar Yafo today. Today there's like an artist colony, and there's like a stadium there. They have like rock concerts. That was called the valley, Gei Ben Hinnom, the valley of the sons of Hinnom, because in the time of the idolatry in the first temple period, they made child sacrifices there, and they played drums so they wouldn't hear the screams of the children. So it was called Tofet because of the drums, and Gei Ben Hinnom became an expression for hell because of that, the fires and the screaming and the crying. So that's where the term Gehenna comes from. So this is the shoulder Yevusi, and it went up west, and it seems as if it was part of the territory of Yehuda. However, we get to the bottom of this Perek, the last thing there, and we have the Yevusi who dwell in Shalayim. The Bnei Yehuda could not expel them, and they dwelt with Bnei Yehuda in Shalayim until today. So we get these kind of hints, and this comes up in Shoftim also. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but you see the Yevusi are stuck there. Now, what does Rashi say? Right? Rashi brings a medrash. Not that they couldn't conquer them, but they felt because of the oath that Adam Abimelech made that they can't touch them. Now, the medrash wants to clarify that they're not the Jebusites of the seven nations, in which case they should have been part of the decree of the seven nations to be killed, but they were actually Plishtim. So there was nothing that they could do at the time of Yeshua. Now, in the time of Shoftim, similarly, that's how you see of Shemeshlem Lo Harishu, Bnei Binyamin. And the Bnei Binyamin dwelt with them till today. So the area of the Harabayit, of the Beis HaMikdash, and I'm sorry, I should have gotten a picture for you, that splits, okay? So the northern part is Binyamin, and the southern part is Yehuda. So when David looks to move his capital from Hebron, which is very Yehuda, into a more central area, Yerushalayim is the best choice. Why? Because it is part Yehuda, part Binyamin. And of course, he wants to bring Binyamin closer, especially after the death of Shaul. Strategically, Yerushalayim is a very, very good location. And it also has spring coming up in the Kidron Valley, which I saw today. I sent some pictures of the chat if you want to look at it. And so it was a very, very good place to conquer. It was also a place that had a reputation, even then, as a place of spirituality and wisdom. Meantime, these Yebusi were not going anywhere. So we have a problem with them. Now, in order to really understand what happens here, we do have to go back to the story in Shmuel. There we are. And I want to show you this stuff that's going on here that's not in Divrei HaYamim at all. Okay? Now the Jews are united, B'yachad Natseach, a wonderful thing. They're all together. David is the king. And they come to Yerusi. By Yomer David Lemor, Lo Tavo Hena. You shall not pass. Any Tolkien fans over here? You're not coming here, David. We're not letting you. Now, David, there's no longer, it's like hundreds of years, there is no longer any descendants of Abimelech here. That ban is lifted, but these people are deeply encroached. And if you watch the little video I sent you in the chat, it's very interesting. They have a very fortified city. They don't think they can be conquered. And they say to David, Lo tavoheina ki im hesircha ha'ivrim ha'pischim lemor lo yavo David heina. Now, what is an iver? Blind. Pisech is lame. This has really occupied the Mefarshim. What does it mean? You have to get rid of the blind and the lame in order to come here. So there's many different opinions here, and it's actually, I think it's extremely fascinating opinions. But let's go through them. So one of them is, I'm going to make sure I get them all. Okay. The generally accepted understanding is that the Yevusi are holding up a blind man that represents Yitzchak and a lame man that represents Yaakov, and saying, you made a commitment not to have war with us while these people are alive. So that would be the Medrash, right? However, it's the time has passed. That's ship has sailed. It's enough, right? So what do we do with this? This is the Medrash. That's very interesting things that the Medrash says. One of the comments is that the Bible says they were making fun of David, and they put actual blind and lame people all around the ramparts, saying, our city is so strong, we can have crippled people as our defense line, and you can't get in here. Ha ha ha. This actually reminds me very much of the current sick situation of the, what our enemies put up as human shields, right? They put children in front. You can't conquer us. It would be disgraceful for the big and great king of Israel to attack lame and blind people. Now, Yerel Bag, by the way, was a little bit of a scientist, had a very creative idea here. And he says that there was some kind of automated water shooter, that these statues were, it was powered by water, and these blind and lame statues would throw clubs around so you couldn't get past them. Very creative. Don't forget the Ralbag was like 1200, 1300. So really interesting, something out of a science fiction movie. And many other ideas, similar ideas. And David doesn't know how to get past this. So he says here, first he takes Matsuda Sion, which is Ir David. Now, I sent some pictures. I'm going to see how they are descriptive, because we were standing in this place today, and I really think that you could see a lot from the pictures. So the first picture I sent you, if you look in the chat, is Silwan. Silwan is Arab village on the other side of that street there. As you could see that, there's like two boys, and down below. And that is Ir David, the biblical Ir David. So this part was easier to conquer, and there could have been a fortress there, but David conquers it. The next picture, two pictures down, the Kidron Valley, okay? And I think, no, before that. The next picture, you can see the Harabayit. So the Harabayit, that's where they set up a wall around the city, a very strong wall, and and whatever these blind and lame, defenses were. So that would be much, much harder to conquer. So David says like this, Kol makeh Yevusi, v'yigabat tzinor. Anyone who strikes Yevusi and touches the tzinor. Now, tzinor in modern Hebrew is a pipe. So it could be that we are now, like Rashi goes here with the tzinor, he says something, this is a point of a tower, but I'm not sure that works with the story. Those these blind and lame that are despised by David. David feels that these obstacles are very, very disgusting to him. And if you notice, there is no end to the thing. Anybody who strikes the Yevusi and touches the Tzinor, we don't know what happens next. Something. And David dwelt in the Mitsudah, which is the Ir David below in the south, and he built he built up the ramparts, and he was greater and greater. Hashem was with him. Now, we don't understand what actually happened, but then we can go to our story in Divrei HaYamim, and we can fill in the blanks. And here it says, in Divrei HaYamim, no mention of the Ivrim and the Piskim. That's only in Shmuel. But there is this pronouncement, Lo Tavo Heina. You shall not come here, David. We're not letting you in. You shall not pass. Right? And David captures Mitzudas Tziyim, which is Ir David down below. And now we find the other half of his promise. Vayomer David, Kol Makeh Yevusi Barisha. Now the first one to strike a blow against the Yevusi, Yehiyel Rosh L'Sar. He will be the head. He will be the chief officer. Vayal Barishona Yoav and Tzriya Vayhi Rosh. This information we did not get in Shmuel. In other words, David sets up a challenge. Anyone who defeats the Yevusi, they will become the Ramatkal, the head of the army, a great chieftain. Now, Yoav takes up the challenge, and Yoav does it. We don't know what happens here, but putting together the idea of Yegabat Tzimor, he touches the pipe. So the theory is that Yoav's idea was to go underground through the water channel, the path that we worked on today. See my sister's on there. Enter the city from below and crack it open for the conquerors. And that's what seems to have happened. Now, the Medrash is very interesting here, but I'll just give you the short version. According to the Medrash, Yoav catapulted himself in with David, and that's how they conquered it. But it's a creative Medrash, but I don't really know how that works. In any event, David conquers Yerushalayim, it becomes his capital. Vayeshev David b'Mitzrayim Ken Karu Lo David Pasuk Zayin Vayiven Hayim Misavim Min Hamilo Ana Savim Yoav Yichayeh et Shara Ir. Yoav becomes the head of David's army, his chief officer, because of this great feat. And it seems as if from Pasuk Het that Yoav was in charge of the rest of the city, and David was in charge of Ir David, and the administrating and having the people taken care of there. Pasuk Tet. This is a very another great comment. We said that David is extremely humble. Hashem stays with him even as he gets greater and greater, because David doesn't hold himself for great. He only considers God to be great, and therefore Hashem stays with him, doesn't go to his head. And of course, we see our terrible enemies. They're unethical, they're terrible, but they can be conquered, and Hashem is with them. Now, Now we switch to the Giborim. And the Giborim is like, we don't have a lot of time, but let's see, we can do some very crazy stories here. At the outset, I want to explain that the Chazal view all these Giborim as not just brave men of valor, macho heroes, supermen, but also as great Torah scholars. And we have these principles, Ezu Gibor, Kopeshet Yitzro. Who are the really great people? The really great people are spiritually great. And we raised the question before, why is the discussion of the heroes of David at the end of his career, Shmuel Bet, and at the beginning of his career in Divrei HaYamim? And we said that the reason for that is now we want to understand how David's kingdom becomes so great. And he has a whole group of people who are intensely loyal to him and who will do anything for him, as we'll see, and who are holding up this great kingdom. And in Shmuel Bet, it's just kind of, we go through all the stories and all the ups and downs of David. And at the very end, we look back and we say, oh yeah, these guys were very great heroes. Now, one of the interesting things is that they seem to be in numbers, in threes, but it's not at all clear who's in which number. So if we go back and forth, 1 second, to the list. Right? The one who dwelt in wisdom, Rosh Hashalishim. Now, Shalosh is 3, and Shalish is an officer. So we see a lot of interchange. As an officers, is it the 3rd? And then there's this Adino Ha'etzni, who killed 800 people at one time. When you go back to Divrei HaYamim, like what's happening, these are the great Giborim David. Yeshava ben Hakimoni. So this must be Yoshev Shevet Tachkimoni. And here we're saying that this was a very, very wise person. And again, we're going to go back to the idea of Chazal, which is that he was the head of the Sanhedrin, right? He was the head of the Shalishim of the officers, who aware of Chanito. He killed 300 people at one time. So wait a second, in Shmuel Bet it was 800, and here it's 300. So you see right away that there's something going on. It's very not clear, but we have to do our best with it. A lot of discrepancies between Shmuel Bet and Divrei HaYamim are in these issues, and it's, you can darshan on it, but it's like very hard to like figure out why it would be 300 here and 800 there. Okay, so whatever. So this is the introduction and the 3 generals. We don't hear anything else about. There's only one mention here, Yeshav ben Chachmoni, Bacharav Elazar ben Dodo Ha'achoki, Hu b'Shlosha Giborim. So now we have theoretically 3, but we're only told about 2. We have this guy, Yeshav ben Chachmoni, and we have Elazar ben Dodo. So who's the 3rd one? In Shmuel Bet, he's called Adino Ha'etzni. And that we said, Adino Ha'etzni, right? When he was learning Torah, he was Adin. And when he was fighting, he was Eitz. He was powerful and strong. Really very, and Elazar ben Dodo is mentioned in both places, and he was one of the 3. And we don't see the 3rd one here. So it could be that the 3rd one is actually Yoav, and we don't really mention him. It's not clear. It seems more like Yoav was over everybody. In any case, he was with David in Pasdamim. Now, Pasdamim very likely is the same place where the battle with Goliath was. That's called Ephes Damim. Okay, so there's this great battle going on with the Philistines, and there's a field full of barley, and the people are running away from the Philistines. And these great heroes stood up there, Yadalid. They stood in the barley field and they saved it. And these heroes helped turn the tide. The Jews are running away, but these three great heroes helped turn the tide of that battle. That comes a very famous incident. Three of the 30, Rosh al Hatzur el David, right? They went up the rock to David, El Marat Adulam, he was the cave Adulam again in Yehuda. And the Plishti camp was in the valley of Ephraim, the street in Yerushalayim that's being torn up today, like most of the city. It's called a very famous city called Emek Rephaim, the Valley of the Ghosts. David Asba Mitsuda. David was in this fortress, and Mitzid Plishtim Az Beit Lechem. And the Plishti camp was in Beit Lechem, David's hometown. That's a good sign. I wish I had some of the water from the cistern at the gate of Beit Lechem. And it's clear from the commentaries that David has no intention that anyone should do anything about this. He's just like, I'm thirsty, and this is his hometown, and it's such delicious water, and it's so hot, and that would be so lovely. However, David's heroes take him very seriously. The Koah is to split. They went through B'machne Plishtim, the three Yiborim, right? And they drew up water from the Bor Beit Lechem, Asher B'Shai the gate. They brought it by Yaviu David, and they brought it to David, and David was horrified. What do you mean you risked your lives to bring me water? I did not mean that. How could you do such a thing? Below Ava David Lishtotam, Bainasechotam Hashem. And David did not want to drink it, and he poured it out as a water libation to Hashem. According to the Yerushalmi, this was Sukkot, and the Nisach HaMayim was going on at that time. But he did not mean for them to do such a thing, to risk their lives, to go through Plishti camp to get him water. Pasuk Yutet. How can I drink this? And they're like, David, we got you the water, drink it. And he's like, I can't do that. You risked your lives to bring me this water. It's like your blood. I can't drink this water. These were the three heroes that did this. Now, it's so interesting because it's like we're not sure who are the three. Who are the three? Are these the three that we mentioned now? This Yeshua ben Chachmoni, Elazar ben Dodo. The other one, maybe Yoav. We don't know. But the three of them went down, and they did this, and David is horrified. Now, I just want to talk about this for a minute, because the Gemara has a lot to say about this. I want to find it for you. This is Baba Kama, page 60. Asher Bashar, and they went through, right? And okay, the sages understood that David was not asking for water, but was using the term as a metaphor referring to Torah, and he was raising halachic dilemma. Okay, not to go into halachic dilemma, which is like, it's a whole discussion about destroying the barley, which belongs to people, to win the war against the Philistines. And there's a lot of this, interplay here in the Gemara about what was the halachic shaila. But again, Torah is compared to water. Water is Torah. He wants water from the gate. And gate is always where the Sanhedrin is. So the Chazal say he's talking about Torah. He needs to know halachic answer, and they risk their lives to get the answer. And he says, I will not. And it's interesting what Chazal say, not that he wouldn't drink the water, but that the halachic ruling he wouldn't give over, although he could act upon it, he wouldn't give it over because it was taken in a place of danger. Now, we didn't get to that yet. Okay. Okay. Pasuk Chapa. Avshai Achi Yoav. Now, it's interesting because in Shmuel Bet, it's always Abishai, and in Divrei HaYamim Avshai. So David had a sister named Tsuya. For some reason, we don't know her husband's name. I don't think it's mentioned anywhere. I could research it, but I don't think so. And Tsuya had 3 great sons, and they are given the name of the mother. The great Ramakal, the head of the army, was Yoav. The next was Abishai, and the third was Asaiah. And they were 3 great warriors. Unfortunately, Asaiah was killed by Avner. It was a very sad story back in Shmuel Bet. We're not told about it here. He was chasing Avner. Avner said, I don't want to hurt you. Leave me alone. And Asaiah would not leave him alone. He was a very fast runner. He chased Avner until Avner turned around and killed him. So this is the second tier of 3. If the first one is this Elazar ben Dodo and Yoav and Tachkemoni, now we have Abishai, the brother of Yoav. He was the head of the 3. He was considered the greatest of the second tier of 3. He was considered the greatest, and he was very well respected. And then we get to some more great people. Chafbet. Benaiah ben Yehoyada. You have heard this name. Benaiah ben Yehoyada was also one of David's great generals, and he continued to be a great general for Shlomo after the death of David. Ben Ish Chayil. He was the son of a great warrior. Rav Pa'alim, a man of many actions. Min Kaptzael. We don't know what that is, where that is. Hu Hikach Ne Ariel Moab. It's a very cryptic phrase. He killed 2 Ariel, lions of God of Moab. Does that mean actual lions? We don't know. 2 great warriors of Moab, that might make sense. But then you have this great phrase, Hu Yarad Mikatz Ari B'tocha Bor B'yom HaShalek. He killed a lion in a pit on a snowy day. So that's like a real handicap, because in a pit, you can't move around too much. And it's a snowy day, so it's freezing cold, and it's snow, and he kills a lion. This is like, whoa. It's very unlikely, very strange. So the Gemara in Brachot says, 18b, he was Ben Ish Chai. By the way, here it says, right, Ben Ish Chayil, right? So here in Shmuel, right? Okay. Ben Ish Chayil. But here in Shmuel it says Chai, Ben Ish Chai. So the Gemara Darshans I wanted to show you, because it's not in our pasuk, it's in Shmuel. What does it mean, Ben Ish Chai? Afil b'mitzatzau karui Chai. So we have a tradition, right? Tzadikim afil b'mitzatzem nekroim chayim. A tzaddik is always considered alive, even in their death. We have this like David Melech Yisrael Chai v'kayam. And so he was a great tzaddik. Now, what does it mean? He was from Kaptzael, Rav Pa'alim, that he did a lot of things for Torah. And he killed the 2 lions of Moab, he left no one his equal in the first temple. The temples are called Ariel. So he was so great in Torah in the first temple period, and the second temple was never as great as this Benayahu ben Yehoyada. Very interesting. And he killed the lion in the pit on this day, snowy day. He broke blocks of hail, and then he jumped into it to purify himself for a mikvah. Others say he learned the whole Sifra, the halachic midrash on Vayikra, in the school of Rav on one day in the winter, short day. And so this is how, I just wanted to see how the Chazal work with these heroes. It's very important for the Chazal. I want to finish up here. We can't go through, well, I want one more. He also struck an Egyptian man who had a spear like a weaver's loom, and he stole the spear from the Mitzri and he killed him. The Chazal darshan here, what's the difference between stealing and gezeling a neighbor? But these are the things that Yahu ben Yehoyada did. He had a name amongst all the great heroes. He was the greatest of his three, but he wasn't as great as the previous three. And then you have from Chavav and on, Divrei HaYamim Alef, Elchanan ben Dodo Beit Lechem, and then we go on. You see here all of this list, right? And somewhere in here, Uriah Achiti. And Uriah Achiti is the end of the list in Shmuel Bet. And it's as if like, oh, when we get to Uriah Achiti, then that's it, because that was such a sad parsha and a terrible thing that there's nothing more to say. But in Divrei HaYamim, we say a few more names. That's not the last name we talk about. And we go here and we continue in the next Perek with more Giborim. But I just want to sum up by saying it's very critical to understand that in Judaism, we're not listing people just for their physical deeds or for their, their rah-rah, macho thing. Every one of David's heroes was a great Torah personality. And it's important to understand this, because the greatness of David's kingdom was not because people were, stronger or better warriors. It was because Kadosh Baruch Hu was with them, because they were great Torah personalities. And they were led by David, who himself was a great Torah personality. This was not, he was a very humble person. He never took any credit for himself. And he always consulted God. He was the Malach Elokim. He was the one that when you looked at him, you saw a completely spiritual person. No one else is described by other people as an angel of God. So that is our conclusion here from all these great people. And this is the success of David. This was success of his heroes. Okay, I think we're going to stop here.